right, welcome everybody to the very first episode of Live Fridays Behind the Creative Curtain. Let's go. So it's great seeing everybody here. Just to let you know, this is a lunchtime talk show, so feel free to eat, feel free to drink whatever you want. Well, not whatever you want. But today we are going to be talking about creative portfolios, how to make them, what to avoid when making them, and all the tips in between. And to tell you a little bit more than I ever could, we have two very special guests that will be coming on today, starting with the CEO of Lead Podcasting, Amanda Cupido. And we have the CEO of Chrysalis, Kesava Kumar. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Good. How are you?
You guys can handle the microphone or whatever is easiest for you guys. So, how are you guys today? Good?
Doing well.
Yeah. So, Amanda, I want to start with you, and then Kesava will get to you as well. Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself, what you do, your background in podcasting, journalism, marketing, and all that?
Yeah, sure. So, as mentioned, I'm the CEO of Lead Podcasting. My company makes podcasts, mainly for nonprofits, education institutions, and financial institutions in Canada. We also work a little bit in the UK and the US. I also am the author of Let's Talk Podcasting, The Essential Guide to Doing It Right, and Let's Talk Podcasting for Kids. And also, I am a professor. I teach in the School of Media at Seneca Polytechnic.
Great, wonderful. And how do, especially in podcasting and journalism, I suppose, how do podcasts serve in your, how do portfolios serve in your area of work?
Portfolios are huge, of course. And my background is in radio, so for a long time I have been focused on creating portfolios for myself and my work, but then also reviewing portfolios of candidates who've been applying to either radio stations where I was leading or to my company, Lead Podcasting. And so I think a portfolio is really important, and sometimes you can overthink it all and it can really stress you out. And sometimes that's what will actually hold you back, the overthinking. And then I also think on the other side of it, sometimes people don't put enough stock into it and how important it is. It really is the way to bring you and your work to life beyond just words on a page, like from your resume or your cover letter. So especially because I work in creative industries, I'm always encouraging people to be really creative and let themselves shine through their portfolios.
So you've worked in, as I mentioned, journalism, communications, marketing, and in podcasting since like early era of podcasting.
Yep.
How do you sort of adapt a portfolio to fit all those criteria, to fit all those different things?
Yeah, so for me, myself, I have different portfolios to highlight my work, especially because I've worked in so many different industries. So radio being one, and podcasting, I would say, is separate. And you mentioned marketing and communications. It's true. I've worked in the nonprofit sector, running their social media channels, and that portfolio looks very different than when I was doing corporate communications and I was creating branded content at a video agency. And so I definitely tailor my portfolios depending on what I'm trying to highlight and who I'm trying to catch the attention of. But how do you do it? I mean, the biggest thing I would say is be really clear on what work you're most proud of and make sure that's highlighted. I think sometimes we get caught up in having so much work and such a large body of work, and maybe I'm proud of all of it, but what's really my number one? What really shines? What do I watch back and still think fondly of? And I think making sure that that's front and center is important, because when you have so much and you're sending it off, you have to realize the person on the other side is not going to have time to go through every single thing and follow my entire career journey, right? So it's about picking those really standout ones and making sure they're tailored and they're the things that I'm most proud of.
Okay, so speaking of your career journey, you've been in podcasting for a very long time.
Yeah.
Since 2011, if I have that right?
I made my first one in 2010. Yep.
Okay, not far off.
Yeah.
How has that shift? How has that, the huge rise of the podcasting industry, how has that sort of changed the way you make a portfolio in that space specifically?
Okay, so if we want to dig deep into the podcasting side, of course, the podcast I made in 2010 is not included in my portfolio right now. But
was it ever?
In the beginning, yes. And
okay.
But even when I did that show, I made many episodes and I picked out my best episode when I sent it out. So I was really honored to be able to interview Stephen Lewis of the Stephen Lewis Foundation, a great philanthropist, a former journalist. Anyway, he's also had such a storied career. He was one of my big guests that I was most proud of, and so that was the interview I always, put at the top and really highlighted. But I would say if you're looking holistically at my podcast career, even within that industry, I'm pretty nuanced and intentional with what I pick out to highlight my work. So for instance, I've worked on podcasts for the Globe and Mail. I've created audio documentaries for the CBC. So when I'm trying to pitch an idea to a major media outlet, these are the examples I'm going to be highlighting. Whereas if I'm talking to a company that's considering lead podcasting to make their podcast, I'm going to look at what companies that are similar to this potential client and highlight those podcasts. So now I'm looking at it thematically and saying, maybe I'm going to pick this finance podcast that I made so that this new financial institution can see, hey, we make the CIBC podcast Smart Advice. Yeah. And we could show you that we could do something in similar nature for you. So it's really intentional on the category and the theme and who I'm talking to and whose attention I'm trying to grab.
So you tailor it to whoever.
100%, and I don't include more than 3.
Really?
Yeah, in my portfolio when I'm sending it to, even in a, because what I like to do, so I'll get granular, like specific tactics. I'm not just putting a link.
Please.
I like to put a screen grab of it, even if it's just the artwork, if it's an audio only piece, and then I hyperlink the artwork. So, and I'll even put a little icon of a little arrow that looks like it's clicking beside it. So you're really enticing the person who's opening it to click on these links and giving them a visual other than just a blue hyperlink. I'll even color, if there is a hyperlink, I'll color code it to make it look graphically designed nicely in the document that I'm presenting them. And I also always put a little description beside it. I think it's important to put a disclaimer beside your portfolio pieces because a bunch of links is overwhelming. You're looking at the titles, but I want to know, when I'm looking at it, when I'm receiving it from someone, I want to know, what exactly did you do on that piece of work? Was it all you end to end, or did you have a team? And then what areas did you execute on? Even if your voice is not on the podcast, maybe you did all the editing, but I need that explainer somewhere. So I like to do this for myself, and I look for it when receiving it. Write a little paragraph beside each link or each example that you're providing and explain why you like it, maybe some accolades or awards that it might have won, and what your role was in all of it.
Sure.
I think it's important.
Oh, that's great. And Kesava, you have obviously founded your own creative agency, which is amazing. And I want to know how sort of portfolios, one, helped you get there, getting the experience to getting to the point where you make your own creative agency, but then also for the people that eventually help you out with that creative agency, how do portfolios serve there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, portfolios have pretty much been the single biggest determinant of our success, because the thing is, we are all artists, so we aren't salesmen by background. We're not, sales is something that you kind of saw on a webpage online, you kind of had to figure out. So very early on, we realized that portfolio was the only way that we could really find a way to stand out, right? We're artists, we have a very idiosyncratic voice, we have something that's unique to us. So that is, at the end of the day, our greatest sales tactic, to say the least. So portfolio has been something very, very important, to the point where I think I've only sent one cold email in the last 2 years to anyone to win business.
Really?
Yeah, it's been completely portfolio. And the early strategy that we had was, instead of, there's 2 aspects to it. One aspect being that you're presenting your best work, like Amanda mentioned, but I think equally important is a way to productize your portfolio. We knew we had to hit the healthcare sector very early on, and we knew that rather than just saying this is us, this is our quality of work, can our portfolio almost become like the equivalent of like an e-commerce site, where people see such a great brand film that they were able to come to us and say, we want to create whatever you have there for us. And I think that was one of the best ways that we were able to scale. And very early on, we realized that, along with us, on September 3rd, 2023, 5 other agencies opened, within a 10-kilometer radius. That's how saturation works. So very early on, we were like, we need to be able to get the bigger brands, really unique work standing out. So whether it be spec ads or even going to big brands and saying, let us do something for you. Because we're so interestingly, we're very aversive to doing things that might pay less or be free, and you should be fairly compensated. But one of the things we had early on is we have the clients that pay the bills. With the spare time we have, how do we see time as an equivalent currency and go after the big brands? And ironically, they end up coming back to you and working with you at budgets you didn't even expect because you were there to put that effort to have a high quality portfolio and brand.
So how does that work? You would go up to them and go, hey.
So I'll give you an example. There's this really famous designer in Yorkville. So my team wanted to tackle fashion. I said, we could go for the smaller stores in Scarborough and Richmond Hill, but if you had to think of fashion, what's the biggest name? They said, well, Yorkville. Well, Yorkville's where you have all the high-end designers. So we just got in a car, we had our suitcase, we walked into a designer shop, and we said, look, this is what we've done so far. Let us do something for you, right? On the house. Very least it's a portfolio piece. Best case scenario, you pay us what you think is fair for this, and we get to take you out for lunch every month, learn about how you've been in this industry. This gamble doesn't always work. Let me preface that. You got to be very strategic about it.
Has it ever failed for you?
Oh, half the time.
Okay,
but the other half makes it worth it because at the end of the day, that designer ended up paying double of what we would have charged, and till today remain one of the strongest collaborators. So it's really about, that is just one among the many methods, but portfolio is our biggest asset at the end of the day, and you should not strive to create the best thing that you can.
Sure. And if I get this right, you also teach an entire course, which is about branding for artists at Workman Arts.
Yeah.
And you said a big part of that is how to create a portfolio. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I take the same philosophy to people that I had the privilege of teaching at Workman Arts, and it really comes down to, we were exploring first, the number one thing is I'm a filmmaker and composer myself, so I come from an artist background, and this is always a question, what goes on there, what doesn't go on there. I say that you're gonna end up in one of two scenarios. One, either you've created such a prolific amount of work, such a great quantity of work and experience, that there is at some point a commonality that binds them all. Maybe it could be something that you want to do. For example, not to mention because he's here, but Dr. Cyrus Sundar Singh, we actually had the privilege to work on something little for him on his website, and he came up with this term, academic creativist. And to me, that was genius because he's done so many different things, but that very thematic statement is a great way to put a theme to what he's done. So oftentimes I tell people that if you're at a space where you have a very specific goal as an artist or in your career, and your work is able to fit under that theme, that's the best way to go. But also, like Amanda had mentioned, there were people that were either just starting off, they didn't have much on their portfolio, or they were targeting something very specific. So it was all about understanding, reverse engineering it, rather than making this about, oh, how can I present my best self? That's an aspect, but having a lot of clarity on who needs to be seeing that. How are they seeing it? For example, like Amanda said, if you are sending something to, when we had to send something to PwC, who are one of our clients, we can't be sending them 5-6 page portfolios or giving them an entire rundown, right? We had to give them 2 or 3 pieces, but there would be moments where, for example, you're applying for grants where having your entire history can be immensely relevant. So, okay, what needs to go on the deck? The 3 pieces, but maybe what's on your site or in other touch points is a more comprehensive history. So portfolio is less about a document, but it's more about a journey that you take someone through. And that's something that I've always tried to, cultivate with my peers as well as people that I have the privilege to teach.
Right. And like you said, you've worked with a lot of different brands, and Amanda, this is a question for you as well. You guys have worked with clients, brands, and companies from all around the world. How do the expectations of a portfolio change depending on where you are? Like, what are the expectations for a portfolio in Canada compared to the UK or Cannes, where you worked as well? What are the different expectations for those?
I'll start by saying that I think you have to really understand who's on the other side and it'll change depending on what country. So, for instance, in the audio industry, CBC is very highly regarded in the US. So if I was going to use that example when I am sending it to my portfolio to a potential client across the border, then including a CBC is nice. They'll recognize that name. It carries that weight. Whereas maybe some of the nonprofits we work for that are known in Canada are not as known across the border. So you just have to have that lens. But I do think in the media industry between Canada and the US, the portfolio format and what is being looked for is very similar. And same with the UK. And CBC is a great example for that in the UK as well. They understand CBC is like their BBC. So again, that translates really well, but perhaps they wouldn't recognize CIBC as a bank, right? So just even though we know that really well, they might not. So if you do still want to put that portfolio piece, just add that explainer into the context. So if I was going to send it overseas, I would say, this is one of the biggest banks in Canada. And so even just that little line will catch their attention. So I think context really helps.
And then if I were to put Live Fridays, I would say that this is one of the biggest podcasts
Of
in Canada.
course.
And, okay, exactly. Okay. And Kesava, how has it changed for you?
It's been honestly a trial and error, and it's still something that we figure out day by day. For some reason, the East loves text a lot more than the West does. That's one thing I've always noticed. Yeah, I mean, they're like, "Oh, this is a great video. Can we read more about it?" I'm like, "But that's the video." I mean, it's really interesting. But I think to echo a lot of the important points, you have to know the person on the other side. Also, and this is the weirdest thing ever. Big brand doesn't mean it's the right thing on the portfolio. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Like we worked with some major brands, and what we have to realize is that the person and this also depends on what stage you're in. If this is like your first time intro, sure, put the big brands on there, get that brand equity. But as you are in the process of figuring out how to work with the client, from then on, your journey is all about giving them enough of a portfolio to help them contextualize what this agency or what this individual could do for me. So I'll give you an example. We had a sport client we work a lot of cricketers. So cricket's a huge sport in the East, and it's one of the biggest, fastest growing sports in Canada. It makes no sense for me to go and give them what I did for TD Bank or PwC. They're like, oh, it's a great name, but what does this have to do? I have a bat and a ball, and I have a great sportsman, right? So sometimes, especially once you're past that, hey, you're great enough for me to talk to you. From then on, in our opinion, in our trial and error, everything is about giving them the most amount of context to feel that if this person were to work on my stuff, what can they create? And I think sometimes we miss that because, let's be honest, we all have a little bit of an inferiority complex. We always want to make people feel like, oh, we are the best here. We are, but the thing is, the best way to be the best for someone is by actually looking at things from their perspective. Take the space to understand that's the person that I need to work with. Let me get into their world. Let me get into the meetings that they have to have with their bosses to get them to be convinced that Chrysalis is the greatest person to work on this, right? So I think remember that your biggest work is always not the best work to present. Always look at it from the perspective of who is on the other end.
So sort of showing the journey of what it's like for a brand or a person to work with you, and how they've
and also
gone
think
through
about like you put yourself in that almost like role play in their shoes and think, okay,
Sure,
this is their expectations that they're outlined. If they had to be convinced by me, and they have to connect me to their need, what are the pieces in my portfolio to present? Is really the perspective that we have over time learned, and it's been paying dividends ever since.
Okay.
And I want to add to that,
Yep.
like speaking on that journey note, I've even had students who've applied to internships with Lead Podcasting, and they've linked me to an entire Google Drive of multiple folders, and it's like overwhelming for me, and I don't even know where to begin. So just think, putting yourself in their shoes and going, all right, if they click this link, where would they click first? Even if you are going to go link to a drive, which I think is not the best way to present work, have one folder that says start here and think of that user experience of like, all right, they're going to click here. Then what opens up, right? And really go step by step as if you were on the other side receiving it and make sure it's really clear that they're clicking in the order and in the way that you'd want them to.
I will remove my portfolio from Google Drive immediately.
And if I could just add a quick note to that, firstly, I think anybody and everybody that wants a portfolio should actually have a website.
Yeah.
It's very easy to do. Like 20 years ago, a website would be a bit of a pain, but with all the modern applications you have, it's as easy as a drag and drop because you have to create an intentional centralized experience. And the other thing about portfolio, and I learned this the hard way too, because I had a website, but I didn't have the drive link, but it was a lot of like, let me put my work front and center. But I consider portfolio a little wider than just your work. Like one of the most important things as equivalent to your work is your, for example, artist statement. I always tell my students that make sure your artist statement is front and center because that is the zone that you're taking me into to visit the entirety of your work or the select works that you have. Even things like thought leadership, like people, oftentimes I've been in situations where I'm like, do I really have something to say? We all have something to say. We live and breathe on this world every day. We experience art in different ways, and we all have something to say. So even having a centralized experience, social media or websites, like think of your work being select, front and center, but you also need all these pieces because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We engage with art, we work with other human beings. So think of your portfolio as not just a drive link with your best work, but really an experience into understanding you.
Sure.
Right?
But I think a lot of people have this problem is creating a portfolio can feel very daunting and pretentious and sort of having that self-branding, it just doesn't, you can feel a bit arrogant sometimes and shy to put your work out there. What advice do you have for that? Because I know, especially like as a person, as a creative, you're constantly changing, trends are constantly changing, so like nothing ever stays as relevant as it would be when you first made it. And on top of that, just feeling like, I don't want to put myself out there, I don't want to talk about myself. How do you get over that if you can? How do you deal with that?
Okay, so a couple tips from me. Number one is ask other people what they think of you and get them to say it. So you could ask your teacher to write you a testimonial. They might write you reference letters, but just ask for like 2 or 3 sentences that you could use on your website if you haven't had any clients yet, or if you have done some volunteer work or even a student association, get a testimonial from some of your peers, people that you've reported into, and that could be a starting point. And that's also looks really professional when you incorporate it into maybe a website or even an email that you're sending off, pitching yourself. Another thing I think is take baby steps. So you don't have to have this entire 5-page website built out. Like I'm just gonna try to build the homepage and know that it's being a web and you're not like sending it to print. It can change. You could put it up for a day and sleep on it and then see how you feel the next day. And so even me myself, I just literally this morning changed the photo on my homepage of my website because I was like, I actually don't like it. I want to switch it. Like that will never end. And there's always going to be more pictures and more things and different ways to tweak it. But just know it's a constant iterative process. You're never locking in, and give yourself some grace and be gentle with yourself around that. Like put something up, see how you feel, sleep on it, show it to some friends. We do focus groups with our podcast. We'll create it and share it with a group and get feedback. You could do that with your portfolio before you hit live. Show it to your professor, show it to a peer, say, what do you think? Be honest, and get some feedback. And hopefully that gives you the confidence to feel good about finally hitting publish and then sending it out.
For sure, and really to add on to that, one of the things I always tell people is if you're ever nervous about, hey, am I putting out the right thing? Should I be putting out things? Because we all are in that boat. It doesn't matter how many years you've spent doing this. We all feel the emotions at the end of the day. Is like make use of systems. Like one of the early things I did with my students was I said, do a CV, but don't do it in a way that I'm trying to employ you. Like if you had to sit on your own and say, okay, I am this person, what have I done? Make a CV for yourself. And then almost everything you do, from every piece of artwork to maybe one time you went to this event and spoke for 2 minutes, put everything, like jot your whole life down and, use that, right? Edit your CV, edit it the way you want. And then after that, stick to it, commit to it, and start building your brand touch points, whether it be your website, your social media, because the mindset then becomes a little better because it's not, okay, every time I'm doing something new, I got to think about what's the best way to present myself versus this is the information I have. This is what I've committed to right now. Let me find a way to translate it to the best ability. So it almost becomes like a school assignment that you do for yourself, not for marks. And getting to a more like internal angle. One of the people that I really like to hear and also had a chance to speak with recently is Chris Do. He's one of the gurus in the brand space. It's interesting because he said the definition of personal branding has changed for me as I've evolved. He said that at the beginning it was about the world, it was about putting myself out in the best way for opportunity. And then he says nowadays, now that I've seen what I've had to see in life, I really see personal branding as a way of like understanding my own self. And I don't think we talk about that too much because we always think that, oh, I am not good enough to put stuff up. But where's that comparison coming from? Who are you comparing yourself to? How do we know what's going on in the mind? Because the person that you're comparing yourself to, they have a comparison point to someone else,
sure,
right? So I think changing the narrative to say, let me find a way to explore my own self through my personal brand is a better exercise. And that's even more frightening, by the way, because it forces you to really add a lot of clarity to your life in places that you may not want to go. But I'd say, like, take the world away for just a brief second, make a personal brand that's for you, and then you'll find ways to tweak it for the world.
I want to add on that because it's such a good prompt. And maybe one of the things to take it a step further is to remove the word brand, because brand is a company. It's not even a human. It's
Yeah, it
like an
sounds
entity.
very commercial.
Right?
Yeah.
We're not commercialized products. We are humans. It's just, who are you as a person? And if you drop that word, it helps you rethink what it means to put yourself out there and create a portfolio.
And even just to add on, because it's such a brilliant point to go off on. One thing, because we are an indie creative agency, right? And I was talking to a lot of people that have owned, like, people that run companies like No Fixed Address or Taxi, the biggest agencies. And there's a culture that's changing. Even the biggest brands in the world that would generally pay, like, a few $1 million to these agencies, they're starting to understand that people don't like work that is fully right, fully wrong. People that are fully right, fully wrong. They like things that are authentic. They like people that are authentic. So the whole culture is changing, where even some of the biggest brands and creatives in the world are going to independent agencies, going to independent artists, because, like, what we lack more than anything else is authenticity. And authenticity doesn't mean the perfect self. Authenticity doesn't mean the worst self. Authenticity just means the you that exists. So, like I said, take the thing brand away. You are presenting yourself to a world in a way that you have clarity, and a lot of the times it works out. But also not to get too ahead of ourselves and arrogant that this is who I am, right?
Yeah.
Finding a way to live
Confident
with the
but not
world,
arrogant.
put yourself out there, but also learn from the world.
Sure.
It's a really beautiful energy.
And I know that authenticity, I know, Amanda, you speak about it in your book, and you both place a very big emphasis on that. How, like, if someone is trying to work for your creative agency, Chrysalis, or for Lead Podcasting, how can they show that in a portfolio? Do they just, like, try to show themselves as a person and just try to show the work that they've put the most heart in, that's meant the most to them? Or, like, how do you reflect that in a portfolio?
I think part of it is just feeling like there's some honesty to what I'm seeing. And if everything is AI generated, for instance, and this is what has been a recent trend, is the entire written pieces, including the email that comes to me, is clearly copy and pasted from ChatGPT. It's hard. I'm not feeling like I'm talking to a human. I can tell it was from ChatGPT.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've even done this with my students, where I had 2 students of mine who had graduated and then reached back out to me to say they want to work in podcasting, does Lead Podcasting have any opportunities? But one wrote this massive, clearly ChatGPT message to me with words I know he would never have used, M dashes everywhere, and another was clearly a gal, a shorter message, but it was just her authentically being like, I'm having a tough time breaking into the industry. Do you have any tips? And is there any world that Lead Podcasting is looking for someone? And that's the person that I responded to and got on a call with. And so I think just being mindful of, I'm a big fan of the potential that AI can help us as like agentic support, but I do think that there's a line where it becomes less human, and in a world where it's getting taken over by automation, it's nice to see that human, authentic side. So at least for that email, even write it yourself, and you can grammar check it, but make sure it's you and in your voice and words that you would normally use when talking.
I mean, and I have to say, this whole, like, marketing is not just a tool. It is like a passion I have. It's like this is not this, but this comparison is another AI thing. But, just on the note of AI briefly, I've been on both sides. I have used AI in a really good way. I early on misused it. I've been going back and forth on how I feel about AI. But I realized that really the essence of it is, don't use AI in a way that makes life easy. Use it in a way that makes life exciting. And that's a very specific thing that I've come to know, because there are daily tasks like, hey, I would have to put all my receipts on a thing. Use AI for that, right? Use AI for maybe even some mundane stuff. But when it comes to expression, when it comes to the ability to communicate with another human being, we have to get rid of this habit of letting AI take over. And we can't blame the technology either, because it is really on us. And so I really think being authentic and being able to speak authentic and respecting the other human being, it's also a form of respect, right? If someone reaches out to you asking you for something or vice versa, that the basic sense of respect you can give that person is taking the time to actually say something that you genuinely have written in your own words, perfect or imperfect. The other thing that I feel is, as young artists, sometimes we really feel like we have to know everything. I had a huge issue, which was that I could never say no to something. That's how actually my company was born. I was a filmmaker. Someone said, "You're a creative guy. You know marketing." I said, "Sure, I'll take it up." Web design. Sure, I'll take it up. It worked for me, but eventually got to a point where that habit became something that was really difficult because when push came to shove, I wasn't either able to perform or I found myself having a very negative experience. It is okay to not know things. In fact, some of the best people that I work in my agency, they were on an interview, and I said, "Do you know how to do this?" They're like, "Hell no, I have no idea how to do that. But give me 10 days. Give me 10 days, I'll figure it out." That person was hired on the spot, right? It's just about the ability to be authentic, but also the ability to be honest to yourself and to the people that you're talking to, but also having the nature of saying, if I don't know something, am I going to go out of my way to, learn it? I think having that and going back to this whole concept of not branding yourself for the world, but for yourself, all of that is connected because you will invariably end up being authentic. And that's, at the end of the day, really what people look for, whether it be the big agencies or small people or whoever we think. I think everyone really right now is looking for authenticity.
Would you say that's the number one thing that you look for in a portfolio when hiring people or working with people rather than, I mean, they're both very important, but rather than the actual experiences that they have? Like if someone has lesser experience, but their portfolio looks authentic and it looks respectful towards you and to any other employers, is that like, would that give them sort of the tipping edge?
I think authenticity, like I'm thinking hard on this question. I think it's a core important piece, but it's not the only piece.
No,
I think
for
the
sure.
authentic portfolio lets me look that extra second longer. And it goes, all right, they've passed the first test. Like the authenticity it's a must have. But then once there is, of course, some things that I'm looking for from a skills-based perspective, from a cultural fit perspective, from a personality, right? There is a lot of things, and it isn't just knowing everything. We're in a world where we could Google anything and know it pretty quick. So to build on what you were saying, admitting when you don't know something, but then showing that willingness to learn, that growth mindset, that's a really important piece too. And that's not only authenticity, but that's like showing that you're a lifelong learner, showing that you are honest and being able to know what your skills are and know what you might need some support with. So even another note I'll say is knowing when to ask for help. That is a big piece. And I find that I have a lot of eager students who start and then they don't want to admit that they are struggling. But then what happens is we're getting closer and closer to the deadline, or we've passed the deadline and then they've done something completely disconnected from what I was looking for. And I would have rather them have said halfway through or even 25% of the way through, "Hey, I'm not certain I'm doing this right. Can you double check this? Can you help me a bit?" And so I think that's another key piece that I'm looking for is like knowing what you're good at, knowing what you don't know. Try to find the answer, but then also ask for help when you need that guidance.
Yeah, I've had that happen on this project. I've
Okay, so
pretended
you
a couple.
know.
Yeah, I've pretended a couple times I know how to do something, and then with Cyrus, I would be on a Zoom call with him, and I go, yeah, I got it. Don't worry about it. And then on the next Zoom call, I go, no,
I don't got it.
please, I need help. No.
We've all been there. And yeah, I mean, from at least from a creative agency or media perspective, like it's funny. Like today, anyone can go rent out a Blackmagic camera, shoot on the sunset and make the most gorgeous frame you could think of.
Yeah.
Like it's Barry Lyndon all over again. So really, like the quality is something that's the given here. But authenticity is something that we do look for very closely. For example, there's a million different ways to do a brand film. The most standard way is, okay, a talking head shot, cut to, you're on a gimbal, you're running around getting products and they look great. But then there's some people that would say, you know what, I want to shoot a talking head on 16 millimeter film. Why? Because it just gets me into the world of their mind. Or people that are saying, I'm going to cut this with like really interesting archival stuff because everyone knows about it. It's just having the bravery to think a little different because the core of an agency, or even in many ways an artist's success, is perspective. What can you show to me? Because we see like thousands of things a day, right? On social media, we are ads. There's like 4 or 5 ads in this environment alone. So we see a lot of stuff. We look for people that are able to bring something that makes me stop in the moment. And for that, authenticity is a big thing. And also because when you're, I'm sure this is a CEO too, people say they could do a million things, and then when it comes down to it, it's a sprint. Like right now we have like 17 projects we're working on. So that authenticity is important because you're able to plan ahead and say, this is this person's ability. But I think the best thing for me also is I love working with people that have the capacity to be where they need to be, but need a bit of a support from a skill perspective or even from a team culture perspective, because those are the type of people that really stick with you for the long run.
Sure. Okay. And especially for people in creative industries that are starting out, like most of us here, we don't really have that many projects to show to necessarily filter the good ones from the bad ones, or we're so eager to show everything. How do you decide what not to include? Like, how do you think to yourself, actually, maybe this one didn't look so good, or I'm not that proud of that? How do you filter that?
I think it's quality over quantity. And one of the tips that actually a journalism professor gave me when I was a student, and I still use this tactic to this day, is, especially because we're in creative industries, is pick your best things, and then if you need it to feel longer, you can create a story around it. And so, for example, I was putting together a TV demo, and I only had like 2 or 3 clips of me on camera that I liked and that I felt good about. And I think you know in your gut which ones are good. If you even cringe a little bit, don't put it in the portfolio. It's gotta be like, I feel good about this. And that might mean you only have 2 now. So if you only have 2, then what you could do is actually film a new to camera shot being like, hi, welcome to my portfolio. I have 2 amazing clips I can't wait to show you. And then you actually are speaking about it, and then you throw to the clip and you create a demo. And that third piece is actually the new piece that you did linking the 2 clips. And so that makes it feel a little more connected, and it tells a story, and it adds your personality. And so actually we just at Lead Podcasting hired somebody who did this with his audio portfolio. So instead of sending us links to a bunch of podcasts he made an audio story talking about himself and how he could do voice work. Obviously, we're hearing his voice. And then he threw to clips of podcasts he produced. He also highlighted he was bilingual, so he threw to a French clip. And then he wove it all into a story. And that was like his cover letter. And we were so impressed. And he wasn't working in podcasting at the time of applying, but you best bet that audio clip made it around to all the managers, even the ones not interviewing him, and everyone was so excited to bring him onto the team. And yes, he's delivered. But it was just such a creative way to highlight his works. Had fewer works, but did it in a creative way, and then that it really stood out from the pack. It was different. It was unique. So that was highlighting his creativity, which was part of part of him and his skill set. So I think being creative like that can really help.
I will be taking notes.
There you go.
Sure. I mean, we had 1 piece on our portfolio in the first couple of months that the company started. So we went one of 2 directions. This is going to be the easiest answer in the world. If you have 3 pieces out of which one is not the greatest, go out there and get something that you could put on your portfolio. And what I mean by that is, I always had this thought that, spec ads or spec media is not something that's valued as much. I've actually found only the opposite to be true. Cameras, equipment, resources are more accessible now than ever. Go out there and create some wonderful spec work, because there's at least a few brands every day, or a few, even moments of media we look at and say, if I was there, I would have done it differently, right? Go out there, put yourself in scenarios where you can enable that perspective to happen in a way that is respectful to resources. The other way that we really tackled it is, and you'll see this a lot on social media. I don't know if you folks have ever seen, reels where a guy with a camera would walk into a pizza store and say, "Let me film something for you for free." Funny enough, they make way more money than you'd ever think, because they achieve one of 2 things. 1, they get spec work that is fantastic. Number 2, they make content out of that process, which people love. And so you're really able to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. So I know there was a time in our history where it was really difficult to have work under your belt, but I think it's in a way become easier than now. It's just that spirit and the effort. Right. Even for us, we were pretty much doing spec work and a lot of things that may not pay the highest, but really high quality brand work, and that's really been our process from day one. So I really think if you don't have a great piece, go make a great piece.
I have to add on that for the podcast space. Podcasts are free to upload and share and get on Spotify and Apple. And it's incredible how many people want to work in podcasting and have not tried making their own podcast. You got to do it. Even if it's just 3 episodes, call it a mini series, make your own. And I always ask my podcast students, how many of you have a podcast? And it's less than 50% will put their hand up. And so you got to put yourself out there. You got to give it a go. And even if it's not the best work, when I see that, I know, oh, they've done it end to end, and at least they're putting themselves out there and trying, and I can build on that. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you got to take advantage of these resources that are available.
Actually, podcasts are one of the most underrated ways to put yourself out there. Going back to the concept of thought leadership and putting yourself, it's not just your work, but when you create a bit of a thought leadership around yourself as well, all of a sudden there's immense value to your work. And you might think, oh, I'm just starting off. Some of the most successful podcasts are two friends sitting on a couch with a pizza in the middle of their thing. And I watch that and I'm like, why am I watching this? But there is a sense of connection and engagement there. So if you can get a pizza in the middle of you and your friend and you have a great conversation about art, film that. Put it out there in an engaging way, right? So I think we should not just look at portfolio as, oh, I need the greatest piece of work here, but it's like, if you don't have a great piece of work, go and create it. There's a million different ways you could go about it.
Do you think it's better to niche down on something like a specific skill? So, for example, videography for short form content or videography for podcasts? Or would it be better to show that you can do most things? Not obviously, it's never good to be okay at everything, but sort of show that, oh, I can do production, or oh, I can do social media management, or I can, if I'm needed, I can also do videography. Or is it better to just really pick one thing and really niche down on that?
I think it depends. So there's two sides to this. There's like a side to the technical experience and then a side to the content. So for instance, sports. It's a really easy example. But if you want to pursue sports, you better be all in sports. The people who are getting into sports broadcasting, their entire portfolio should be sports, and that's what they're looking to hire, and because it is a world of its own. And I was hiring at a branded content agency where I had an entire sports portfolio come towards me, and we were doing educational content, and I just already went, this is not going to be a good fit. And that was, even though they were very talented, I just knew they wouldn't be happy here. That person ended up going on to work for TSN. Good for her. That's where she belonged, right? She had an entire sports portfolio. So if you're really passionate and really clear and dedicated onto something like a category or a beat, then yes, I think you got to double down, because that's, if you start spreading yourself too thin, you might not get to where you want to go. Now, with regard to on the skill set side, I do think that you have to have a good mix. You don't want to go too niche into one small category, because right now we're in a world where we need people to be able to do multiple things. There's also tools that are emerging to make people who are not specialized be able to do multiple things. Canva, for instance. Everyone can be a bit of a graphic designer, and so having I think something like that, I just want to see somebody who's willing and open to learn that. I'm not asking you to have, full tilt Photoshop skills, but you need to be open enough to just work with a Canva account. Unless you are, of course, then wanting to get into design, but then it's what else can you bring to the table? Now, everyone has a little bit of graphic design. Tools are making it easier for us to do it ourselves. So if you are going to go niche, what else can you bring to make yourself stand out? And as AI technologies get better and better, we got to really be thinking, all right, what's going to be available to be done with a click of a button or with a prompt, and how can I one-up that? How can I bring a human side to that? And so, for instance, in the podcasting space, doing quick edits where you're just like cleaning it up and putting music underneath, that used to be a good enough skill set, and you were like, I'm an editor. Now, AI is already getting pretty good at doing it. Very soon, it will be doing it. So if you want to go into editing, you got to be mastering, mixing, sound design, maybe creating your own sounds, right? You got to be like one up, and
Easy.
even that, yeah, right? It's a lot, but you got to like expand out so that you have a bit of breadth to your skill set, so that you're not just a one-trick pony, and then if a tech comes out the next day that does it, you're eliminated, right? You want to be sure that you're diversifying your skills, and you can still avoid things you really hate. That was another thing. Like if you really are against editing, but then you got to expand in other ways. So just think about, how can I present as a really great asset to a team that's not just going to be doing this one very, very niche task.
We use Riverside AI for podcasts.
There you go.
So we don't hire a podcast editor anymore. But you hit the.
You don't have a podcast editor at all?
We have it for. Funny enough, we have it for short form content.
Okay.
Because the amount of skill that you need for really great short form. With long form, because it's longer, there's you're not putting text up every second.
No,
we
yeah.
actually find AI at least doing the assembly edits for
wow.
us, right?
Okay.
So it's an ecosystem we're beginning to use to be efficient too. But
Sure.
very early on, we realized one thing: we got to be jack of all trades, masters of some. And I think that's something we realized early on. When we started the company, we were supposed to be healthcare and media specialists, and that's one of the 11 things that we're doing right now. But that process has been organic. What I mean by that is I can actually speak with clients. You'd be surprised how many different brands, big or small, have very fragmented brand ecosystems. Like the web guy doesn't speak to the social media team, and they don't speak to the people that are doing the main campaigns. And so we identified that problem very early on and said, okay, we're not specialists in everything, but we did envision a point where as we do more great work with the client, they're going to come back and say, hey, can you send this to the web person, and can you speak to them a little bit? At that point, the window of opportunity opens up. Why don't we manage a little bit of your web presence as well? We have a great web team. So the point being that I think we are pushing ourselves to this point because of AI, but also because of market saturation, where you need people that are phenomenal at something, but are also able to apply their skills across a variety of things, whether it be graphic design, web, social media, and it's actually not, it's become easier to upskill yourself in those ways in today's day and age. And the other thing is, as AI grows and it saves people more money, we have to start pivoting ourselves to a point where how replaceable do we become? Because it's a lot more difficult for a person to get rid of a company in this instance who's doing their media and their web and their social media, who has a phenomenal understanding of their brand ecosystem, than maybe a podcast editor or a long form, short form editor who's been there for a couple of years, right? So use the ability to be a bit more of a specialized generalist. I know that sounds a little paradoxical, but the ability to do that so that you could embed yourself in a greater way into teams or with clients, because the more you do that, the more irreplaceable that you become. Because at the end of the day, we're still human beings. We're not, transacting with robots yet. We are not going to let go of the people that have a fundamental understanding of what we need. So try to look at skill from the perspective of how much more valuable could you be to a team versus just saying, what does the market need right now and how do I upskill myself for it?
Okay. And I kind of want to take a shift from from this specific conversation and ask a bit more of a random one. If you guys were both all of a sudden jobless for some reason, what creative way would you showcase your own portfolio? Like, what measures would you take to make sure that you do stand out, that you do show that you know what you're doing, in whatever field that may be?
Well, I think my website is always evolving and growing. And so I think tailoring my website to what opportunities I want to be applying for or be found for, and recognizing that SEO is a little bit dead and now we want to be coming up in AI answers. And so really, I haven't done a deep dive on my website to do that. So I would definitely do that. But I think when applying, one thing that I like to do when I'm applying for opportunities that I really, really want is I actually create an entire, I guess I could call it a portfolio in Canva. So it's beautifully designed. I match it to the brand colors of the organization I'm applying to, and I try to match the fonts too. And I like even something like a cover letter. To me, I haven't written a cover letter in a Word doc in over a decade. I've been really creative with what is a cover letter. I'm embedding social media posts. I'm hyperlinking things. And now that's why I'm not even doing it in a doc anymore. I'm doing it on a beautifully designed Canva template where I'm putting really interesting photos. I'm hyperlinking everything so they could click on anything in that and learn more and see more. And it's a visual representation, but also written work about me, presenting me. And I think it's also really important to still write, why do you want to work for them specifically? And this is where you dote on them a bit. You tell them why you love that organization. What about them stands out? Why do you think you will be a good match for them? And really make it about them and not just about you. So there's always got to be a section about the place you're applying to. And that really connects the dots between you and your portfolio and them and how that could be integrated into their team. So taking a creative approach like that, I think really helps. And I've been shouting out Canva a lot, but I do think that it's such a great resource. And when people are filing in all these same old, like black and white documents, like I just think that's especially in the creative industry, that's so in the past. We've got to be upping our game, and even how you present yourself is part of the interview, is part of the portfolio. How you write that cover letter, it's your first impression. So be creative with it. At some points, I've even done no cover letter. If they ask for one to be uploaded, like on one of those job sites, I literally put a blank doc with just a link to a video, not even any text, and it's just a link, and then they have to click it to watch. Now, if you're getting scanned for work keywords, that'll work against me. But then it's me actually doing a pitch tailored to them, and pitching myself as a video, like talking to camera with like creative things. So I think there's like a lot of ways like that you could really stand out.
I'm a Canva fan forever myself. In fact, we just did a 30-minute video for a major shoe brand, and we actually used Canva and a little bit of After Effects to do a video. Like it's crazy how you can explore that tool enough and find some amazing ways to work on it, to the point where sometimes when we're on Photoshop, we're like, oh my God, it feels a little ancient that we're on this, because tools like Canva have become so much more powerful than we can imagine. And honestly, Canva Pro is worth it. But the other thing that I would also say is, this is where bringing it back to putting yourself out there in thought leadership. Like, if I didn't have a job, the first thing I'd be doing is putting myself more out there where people can see me. That's the networking, that's one side, but also like really utilize social media. It is crazy how a pizza shop in Richmond Hill now has the same amount of engagement as a company that spent $500,000 on ad spend.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? How much do you think their budgets are?
Have you ever seen the shawarma man downtown?
Shawarma man, Shelby Shawarma, right? Like it is crazy how reach at this point is just about what is the most creative way you could entertain me. That is a power. Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying that is a power that there's a part of me that almost wishes that I just go back to becoming an entertainer. Like I'll just grab a vlog camera and go around, and even people that sell private jets now, they're on TikTok, which is the craziest thing ever. So I'd really say that you are at a perfect time to actually put yourself out there. It's just about, finding a very creative way, and that doesn't mean using your brain, but also using a little bit of this, right? Using your senses to put out great content. And also, it's kind of weird that I have to say this, but I'm realizing this more and more, because AI is coming in, and we're also at a collective stress point as a world, because unemployment is on the rise. There's so many different things, but like actually care about who you're reaching out to. You send out a cover letter that's very customized. Please try to remove ChatGPT out of your system when you're sending stuff. But I always start with a question. So if I'm talking to someone who I'm trying to work with, I ask them a question that has nothing to do with doing a brand film for them or related to them or me. It's related to a genuine question I have about the business, right? In fact, I remember one of the clients I had, I asked them, like, how do you plan to survive in the print business when digital's on the rise? Like, I asked them an existential question. It was a little daring, but it was something I was genuinely curious about. And people really like when you start off with curiosity, because they know you're someone who cares. So first, care more. Number two, put yourself out there on social media, even LinkedIn, text posts. It reaches the craziest amount of people. You could have like 10 followers or 100 followers, and you'll end up, the president of, let's say, Blue Ant Media would end up seeing it, because the algorithm is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's a problem, but sometimes it could lead you to places that you'd never imagine. So just put yourself out there and have fun. That's what people really like.
Okay. I have about like 10 other questions to ask you, but I don't think we have the time to ask all of them. So on that note, we're going to move on to a Q&A section. So if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask Kesava and Amanda, put your hand up. You'll get a microphone. Yeah. Don't embarrass me, guys. Someone put your hand up. Yes. The fourth mic is coming your way.
Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk today. I just wanted to know, I'm interested in becoming a multimedia designer. How would you tailor, like, say, a cover letter in terms of multimedia design? And how would you go about, because multimedia covers a lot of video editing as well as graphic design. So how would you not make it too crowded on your portfolio, but also highlight that you can design across multi-medium platforms?
I feel like, could you just repeat? Sorry, it's kind of hard to hear a little bit. So what's the core of the question?
How can you tailor your multimedia design portfolio to not feel too crowded, but just to give the employer some information that you can design across platforms, and how can you creatively make that in your cover letter as well?
Okay, so for those of you who couldn't hear, her question was about she does multimedia, she does design, but how can you highlight all the other things that she's doing in like a cover letter? And so one example is I actually like these kind of visual representations of different like bar graphs that high, and it could be just a little corner, and that's a creative way to be like, here's all of the skills or tools that I use, and then you could actually put a little dial or a bar graph to show your experience level in it and visually represent it. And you don't have to write a million sentences. It's just each word. It's almost like a bulleted list, and then colors that represent, how deep of your experience is. And another way too is to just give them the option to learn more and click through to something that then it's on a separate page and they can learn more if it doesn't all fit in the cover letter. But that's just one idea that came to mind.
Yeah. And talking more about the cover letter, because I think it's a problem that all of us have, is how do we put everything? The thing is, you have to reverse engineer this, and this is the more tiresome part of it, is that like it specifically depends on what you're applying for. Like for example, you are a graphic designer. Your cover letter has to be first and foremost that I'm a graphic designer, that this is the type of work I've done, and here's why it's relevant to you. Also, for example, I'm really well versed with the Adobe Creative Cloud or Adobe Creative Suite, for example, which allows me to perhaps translate a lot of my graphic design work to effective video. Finding ways where the multimedia-ness of you is maybe a line or two as a concluding point, so that people know, okay, this is what you're great at, this is what you're also specifically convincing me for, but hey, maybe it's a great person to hire in the event that 6 months down the road I need them to work on something, right? It's something that you have to learn to gauge depending on the type of place you're applying for, and that just means more custom cover letters.
And I have to add one more thing that just came to mind. I love honesty, right? So you could even just end with saying, you know what, I couldn't wrap my head around how to fit everything in this cover letter. So please, I would love to have an interview so I could tell you more. And then that's just like such an honest line to include, and then it opens up the window for you to explain in the next phase.
And yeah, on your website and stuff, like the ideal world is, let's say you have done video editing and graphic design for a project. Like that's the best world, right? Like if you've been able to do more than just graphic design on a project, like find a way to have a dedicated projects page where, yeah, your video is front and foremost, or whatever you want to pitch is front and foremost. But if I scroll just a little bit more, I'm able to see that you've also applied, and do this visually, not just text-wise, but apply visually how we've gone from, oh, this is great stuff in a video, to, oh, she's also created a graphic design mock-up, or she's created something related to, let's say, web design. That's something that you could take people through a journey. But like Amanda mentioned, put what you are applying for, convincing them for first and foremost, and don't feel shy to do that.
Can I make a request of this group before we get the next question, which is, and this was a great networking tip someone gave me, anytime you're in a studio or an event, a networking event or something like this where you're asking Q&A, it's an opportunity actually to highlight yourself. So whoever gets the mic next, I would say, like, say your name, say what program you're in, say what year you're in, and then ask your question. And I think no matter what event you're at, you should always do that. It's a little self-promo tip. So there we go for the next one.
Who's that gonna be?
Okay, thank you so much for your speech today. It's really useful. And my name is Cecilia Shan. I'm a second year in arts management and also a major in art history. So my question is, like, you mentioned that AI is going to be a trend in the future. So, and you also mentioned, like, during talking about authenticity, that there should be a balance, and also there should be a line in, like, human authenticity and also the use of ChatGPT and also AIs. So, like, could you please give us some advices on, like, how we can apply AI usage to the creative field, and what are the things that we should be avoiding? Thank you.
You want me to go first? Okay. You jump in when you want to go first. All right, so I'm actually going to the TED AI conference next week in Vienna. So I'm sure I'm going to get more insight. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, do so today, and then you'll see my posts next week when I'm there. So stay tuned for more. But right now, what I'm advising is, don't be afraid of AI. And I think it's a losing battle because a lot of creatives are saying, I hate this. This is killing my craft. And they're like, stomping their feet. And I actually think that's just wasted energy. The AI technology is coming, and we have to not only stay aware of it, but then also play with it, try it out within reason, read the privacy policies, read the terms and conditions, but don't put your head in the sand and go, I'm not going to engage because I'm a creative. I think that's so dangerous. It's like Blockbuster, who's like, no one's going to stop coming to get VHSs from our store. We've seen this time and time again. So you've got to be head up, aware, looking around, what's coming down the pipe, what are people using, and how can I differentiate myself? And it's impossible for me to know the exact answers because I don't even know exactly what's going to come down the pipe from tech perspective, and it's changing every single day. But what I do know is that as a producer in podcasting, I'm already thinking about, all right, that editing thing, all right, I already know that's kind of going to be a skill that's taken, and as sad as it makes me that a human's not doing it, I got to come to terms with that and go, how can my agency then one-up it? So one idea I had was like, well, live streams, live podcasts, right? That we're pretty far from having a robot be here interviewing somebody. We're going to still want humans doing the live stuff. So what if we incorporated live elements into every podcast that we make? Because that's a differentiator. And maybe that's not going to serve me forever, but that's going to serve me for the next bit. So I think it's like drill down into the area of art that you are most excited about, become very aware of what tools are out there, and then think of what ways that you could bring your own human self to be the differentiator. One thing that Adam Grant just spoke on last week at a conference when talking about the future of work, I thought it was so interesting. He was talking about how AI now is actually showing empathy. And that was one of the things that we always claimed, well, humans have empathy, but there was research that showed a doctor delivering news, a human doctor and an AI doctor delivering news through a chat system, and humans were thinking that the chat version was more empathetic. Like that was how they voted when they didn't know. So of course that was a bit alarming, but what he said was the new quality that actually is proven that is not showing up in AI for real is humility. AI is gonna fake that they know everything and hallucinate and not own up to it unless you call them out, but humility. And I thought that was such a nice thing to keep in the back of our mind going, okay, so how can I have that show up through me and my work and my portfolio? Just some food for thought that was top of mind for me.
Yeah, in fact, OpenAI loses millions of dollars because every time we say something, ChatGPT says, thank you so much for, so the whole thank you so much actually costs them millions because AI has become tremendously good at empathy because it needs that as a way for humans to accept the technology better. But coming to your question, because that's been top of our mind even at Chrysalis or even me as I was even planning on pursuing a PhD at some point on AI, is that learn the tools. Like at the end of the day, AI is going to take over. Who do you think is going to be having that technology take over? The prompt engineers. Today, if I had a friend, by the way, 7 months ago, started learning AI. Today, he has $1 million company because all he did was he understood the technology and he said, you are going to use this anyways. At some point, you are going to replace me with this. Again, not entirely true, but that was his sort of viewpoint of the world. He's like, why don't I get ahead of the technology, learn the tools, and actually offer that as a service? And if you are the person that values humanity and integrity, you will do it in a way in your process where you go to the client, gain enough leverage and say, hey, I don't think it's right for us to get rid of all the After Effects editors because you want to just use more AI and get done with. Let me find a way to save you money and use the tools to create the best version you can. So I think we all need to spend a little bit more time understanding the tools and not being terrified of it because, as Amanda mentioned, it's coming whether you like it or not. And the second thing is, if we are trying to put a positive spin on this, you have to be able to understand something to use it responsibly. So the answer is never is, let me be aversive to it. The answer is, let me get into it to understand how can we do things responsibly. And I think a big thing, just a more tangible note, is things like research. Like people are not using the deep research function enough on ChatGPT, which is surprising because why do they think they lose millions of dollars for our collective research benefit? But things like research, things like even doing A/B testing, right? Where at one point things that are methodical, like really use artificial intelligence, not as a way to alienate people that do that, but as a way to better spend your time on things that only humans can do. And humanity is going to become a novelty. Just like how, we live in a world where we pay more for food that's less processed. We pay more for things that you can find in the forest. Like, does that even make sense to anybody? But it does, because we will always crave for things that are not in our everyday world. Humanity will become the same thing. So learn the tools, find a way to offer it as a service, and honestly, like, hold on to your humanity, you'll be just fine.
I've never thought about it that way. That's actually very interesting. But I will say the next episode, our theme is the ethics and use of AI.
Amazing.
So that's going to be a very long one, and I'm very excited for that one. Do we have any more questions from anyone in the audience? Rosa, I know you have one as well.
Professor taught me during I thought he was asking the question.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So it's Dr. Cyrus. If you can both speak to something as simple as who should the cover letter be addressed to, and who should it not be addressed to?
If you could find the person that's the hiring manager, I think that just shows you've gone the extra step. And on LinkedIn, you can pretty much find anybody. And so I know we mentioned LinkedIn already, but I will one up that. I'm a big user of LinkedIn. It's a very, very powerful platform. If you're not on it, get on it. It is the opportunities that have come my way. I wrote a whole article about how my business was developed and grown because of LinkedIn. So definitely get on LinkedIn and try to find the person who is the hiring manager. And I do think that that is a nice little touch. But sometimes, again, the to whom it may concern is so overused that it's like, it's just noise. So even if you really can't find the person, you could be fun. Hey, you've probably read through a lot of cover letters, but here's one more, and thanks in advance for reading. Like, you know what I mean? You could like be fun with how you even open it up and show your personality and creative flair through even just every word counts, every line counts. So don't just put throwaway text in there. Or you could even be like, hey, I tried to find who the hiring manager was on LinkedIn. You're really hidden, but no worries. Like, here's a cover letter for you. I hope you enjoy it. Like, you could get into it in a really fun, creative way that's just honest. So I'm all for creativity in those moments.
Absolutely, and I think LinkedIn finding the person that posted the job or is in charge is the easiest way. Another big lesson I learned because of a lot of failure that I experienced through this was be very mindful of the job you're applying for and who you think is going to read it. I'll give you an example. When I applied when I was 18 or 19, or I don't know what age it was, but I applied to be a video editor. I was writing things like, was able to manage large-scale media campaigns from editing to creative delivery, yada, yada, yada. And it was like I was writing to the senior executive there, and I didn't get that job. Like, they rejected me in half a day, and I realized why is because who is looking at this resume for a video editor or a cover letter for the video editor? It's the manager. And I just wrote a cover letter that made the manager feel like I'm getting rid of your job, right? So the other thing is, like, it's a little bit of humility that you have to play, that like sometimes there is a scenario where you might even have, in very specific ways, more experience than the person you think is hiring you, but also keep an eye on the job. Think about who you might be working with. Ideally find that information, but if you can't, like, play in a way where they feel like you would be an asset and not a threat. Like, rather than saying manage large-scale campaigns and, was able to just say that I was able to be a key player in teams and helped, quality check or help deliver, et cetera, where they feel and read that, okay, yeah, this is someone I need in my team. So write in a way that's a little bit more, be humble in accordance with the job and what you're applying for. You don't have to always speak to the CEO. Speak to the manager. Speak to who you think is going to be looking at that resume first.
Okay. Rosa. Oh, they're meeting in the middle.
Hello, I am Rosa. I am majoring in arts management as well, and I'm in more of like the theater and dance sector. So I was kind of wondering, how long does it typically take someone to sift through a portfolio? a portfolio, and also potentially how long does it take before someone switches off the dance reel or the directing reel? Um, yeah. How long is too long of stuff to put into your portfolio, if that makes sense?
I think putting yourself in the other person's shoes is a really good exercise, and I don't think it happens often enough. You hear right now there'll be 400 people applying for an internship role. Like, you are spending hours if you're going through all of them. That's even if you do go through all of them, which it's unfortunate when people aren't able to. But no, I have spent so much time going through. So it is exhausting, and will sometimes happen over multiple days. And usually how I've done it was start, like, anything that caught my eye, I flagged it. Then I went through all the flags, and then I keep narrowing it down. So what you want to do is just stand out quick, because we're moving through quick and just looking for something to catch my eye. And so even like a dance reel, yeah, people assume that you're watching the whole thing. No, it's like, you're watching enough to make a decision. That's all I need. I need to watch enough to go, this is worth going over to the next round or not. And so that might mean I'm only watching 30 seconds, even listening. If I listen to a podcast and the intro is not well mixed, I'm just like, you're out. I'm not listening more, right? And so you gotta really make sure. Another really good tip actually is if you have like an episode, let's say, of a podcast, I'm gonna start from the beginning and click play. Unless in that context, someone says, and listen at the 10-minute mark, or better yet, they actually trimmed the part they want me to listen to and go, and I've trimmed the best part of this podcast for you. Here's the snippet. That's even better, because otherwise I'm starting from the beginning. And if you had a rough intro, then you're going to get tossed aside no matter how good that interview was. So if you could get granular with what you want me to look at and make it easy for me to get to, that's going to help you more likely go on to the next round. So, yeah.
For sure. To keep it short, a great portfolio, 3 minutes. A good portfolio, 1.5 minutes. A bad one, 25 seconds. I think that's pretty much how, whether it be myself or my peers, have always seen portfolios, because there's so many people applying. So I'd really say, like, which is why even our company reel, our first one was like 1:40. Our one this year was like 28 seconds, because we just, like, one of two things really happen. If I cannot in 30 seconds convey something to someone, then chances are I'm not fully sure about what I need to convey. And this mentality also comes from the filmmaking, like, give me the log line. Figure a log line of a 3-hour film. If I could figure out a log line for a 3-hour film, I could figure out something in 30 seconds that encompasses me. And a great practice that you could also do is, for example, if you have reels, what we did is we had our first reel become an unlisted link on YouTube, and we just sent it to people that we might know in our circle that are not our best friends who will say this is the greatest work of art, but genuine people from an arm's length distance that can objectively look at it. And I'll just send it to maybe 50 or 100 people. And then what I'd actually do is I'd go on the back end of my YouTube account and I'd see runtime and I'd see the drop-off point. So you actually can get that information through unlisted links. Okay, so it seems like most people are dropping off at 15 seconds. Maybe I need to do something better on my other 15. So you can actually find ways to test this before you even put it out there.
Thank you. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Hi, sorry for not introducing myself early, but my name is Angela. I'm a fourth-year student in Arts and Media Management, and I have a passion in graphic design and engaging students, especially youth, in engaging with more arts, culture, and media organizations. I have a question about interviews and the interview process. How do you advise to best prepare for an interview, and how would you say is the best advice that you would give to someone who has probably is not determined that they're going to get the role? What would you say to, like, comfort them?
So I think interviews it could really make you feel nervous, but the more, number one, and back to the authenticity, be yourself and not feel like your answers have to be like super perfectly worded in the moment. Like, try to take the pressure off. You just want to try to talk normal. And because as someone who's hiring, I want someone who I can just talk with, because that's how I'm going to talk with them every day, right? So we want to just have like a good energy. And even if you can say, hey, I'm going to just focus on my like good positive energy going into this. Like that's already half of it. I also recommend doing proper research before you go in. And if you don't know something, owning up to it. So I've had interviews where I was hiring in the social media space and I was saying, like, what have you seen on our social media channels that you think we could be doing better? That was one of my questions. And I had one candidate say, well, I think you should start a YouTube channel. But we had a YouTube channel. She just hadn't like properly done the research. And so I would have rather her said, you know what, to be honest, I didn't have a chance to look up if you have a YouTube channel yet, but do you? Yes. Okay. So then in that case, here are some best practices, right? Like you could be more honest about it. So be honest, but do your research. It's better if she, then the candidate who got that job was the one who said, really specifically, you did this tweet a month ago and I would have worded it differently. I was like, wow, okay, she was on it and had really good advice. And so do your research, admit when you don't know things, be yourself, come in with a positive energy, and always send a follow-up email. And not just saying thank you. The follow-up email, I think that's like everyone kind of knows. Send the thank you, but add something in there that's of value. I love using that as one last chance to like prove myself. Hey, thank you so much. And by the way, we talked about this. And here's a piece I did actually about that exact topic. Or here's an interesting article, even if it's not your work. Here's an interesting article I found that you might be interested in. Like just make there be a give in that follow-up email because that will make you stand out.
I think to add to that, like value add is the greatest note, right? Whether it be sending a follow-up with a great resource. I also love to use the word our. Like if I'm getting hired by a company, I'd always say, the way I'd go about our instead of saying your, because you always want to keep priming them to feel like, okay, yeah, our, so you're part of the team, right? I'm going to meet you at lunch and we're going to talk about this. The other thing that I would say about interviews is, just for your own peace of mind, go on Google, look at all the interview questions and prep, but I've yet to have someone who's asked me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because we're trying to figure out the now, right? But just do it for the sake of, you wanting to give yourself some peace. But I think knowing the organization, and more importantly, if you've come to an interview stage, you will know who you're interviewing, who is going to interview you, know the person. Because I think, again, everyone is constantly contextualizing stuff. If I've looked at 400 applications and I'm interviewing 10 people, the only focus in my mind is going to be, how do I see this person fit that role? But a big part of it is I have a bias, right? So I might think yourself as a video editor might be the strongest asset because I come from a video background, even though I might be applying, or you might be applying for a creative director job. So really know the person as well. And I had this one thing, because I conducted my first round of interviews in 2023. That's when my whole approach to interviews changed. Because you know what the weirdest thing was? I was just as scared conducting interviews. I never thought I'd be scared conducting interviews. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. Like, are we positioning ourselves the best way? Would that person want to work, at my organization? So know that chances are, unless your HR person is a pro and has done like 10,000 interviews, the other person is just as nervous, or at least a little bit nervous. So bringing that positive energy is so important, because at the end of the day, on top of you being skilled, people need to feel comfortable working with you. So don't be shy to go in at that positive energy. No one's going to be like, oh my God, that's not what I'm used. No one's really going to think that. In fact, chances are they're going to loosen up and you can have a more productive conversation on how you're a best fit. So bring in positive energy. You're not going to go wrong at all.
Okay, and if I can just ask one last very short question in one sentence, if everybody here today, the advice that they go home with, would that be authenticity? Is that what you said? What you would say is the one thing to draw from this? If
Go.
I'll go first on the
Finally,
final
he
question.
goes first.
I'd say I will have to give you two sentences for one for each, but
that's
I'd say as both an artist and as human beings, authenticity is key. And it took me a lot of years to convince myself of this, but I hope everyone can realize it sooner, is that you are far more valuable than you think. And if you want people to see that, you need to start seeing that in yourself and be actionable about it. And the other thing a key word in my career that I always use is creative commercialization. Once you've started to be authentic with yourself, always look at creative ways to commercialize what you do. So, you're not just convincing people of, oh, here's why I'm a great fit. Have things in your portfolio that people will be like, I need this exact thing for my company. Can you give it to me? Productize some of the work you've done in a very sharp way. And also, don't be afraid to, be a thought leader, right? Leader doesn't mean you have to lead 10,000 people. Leader means you have a life experience that has learnings that can apply to another person. That's more than good enough. And we all share that in this room. So really don't be afraid to express yourself out there. And you will be right, you will be wrong, but the point is you're yourself.
That's great.
I think we've talked so much about authenticity, so I love that. But I think I'm gonna leave what we've said about authenticity because you see how we look for it. So the last note I'll give to take away is work hard. Be proud of what you do. Everything you make is going out in this world and is ultimately part of you. But at the same time, give yourself grace. Don't be so hard on yourself because there's always more and there's always something better. And at some point, you have to stop, right? Especially as creatives, you have to put it out in the world. So it's finding that balance between working hard and being proud of what you do, but then giving yourself grace and be gentle with yourself and say, I did my best and I've put it out there and let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you guys so much for your time today. Can we have a massive round of applause for Amanda and Kesava? Thank you guys, and thank you all for coming. If you enjoyed, don't forget to follow us on our socials. It's at Live Fridays Podcast on Instagram. And thank you to Capture Club for setting up all the video and the lighting. Thank you to ACSMA. Thank you to I.D.E.A.S and the sound crew, and thank you to all our volunteers. Thank you very much. All right, thank you guys.